Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. My name is Samuel with Cedar Pine Designs, and today's project is going to be a matching set of end tables made by Lane. They are from the 1960s, more specifically 1968 to be exact. The finish on them is in need of some desperate help, but they are structurally sound. So let's jump straight into this project and get our hands dirty. So for today's video, this is going to be a full restoration. These are in such good shape that they don't need anything else besides a good sanding, restaining, and a finish. They do have some blemishes on them, and some of them I am going to be able to take out, but some of them are going to stay, and I believe it does add to its character. One thing that I really like about Lane pieces is that the serial number is actually the manufacturer's date, and for this one that would be May 24th, 1968, and that extra number at the end, that 2, from what I found out online, is actually its area that it was manufactured in, so I haven't really looked too far into that yet, but I thought it was something that is really cool. This bottom shelf was a little tricky to remove. From what I found, on the next one, because I have 2 of them, is if you pop 2 sides out, you are able to just pull it up and then slide it out. It could be really easy to want to try to force the legs out of the way, but I didn't want to cause any kind of damage and have to do any kind of unnecessary repairs. And right here I am also removing the top. This is something that I really love about like high-end mid-century furniture, is that most of everything comes off and they don't typically just glue and make things impossible to take them apart, and it really makes the job a lot easier. So the top, after removing the screws, it does have a little bit of glue to keep it in place. Putting it back together, I'm probably not going to do that, but it popped right off. It wasn't anything too difficult, and as you can see, I move over to sanding the top with 150 grit sandpaper, and there was almost no finish left on top, and that stuff came off by far easier than any other project I've ever had. They do have some deep minor scratches. If you just work your sandpaper around and on it, you can get those things to almost 90% disappear every time. You just want to try not to dig too deep in just that one area of the scratch, because you'll create a dip and you can blow through the veneer. I switched to a 220 grit sandpaper, and that's going to be my final grit, so that way I can take out any scratches or pigtails left behind by the 150 grit sandpaper, and that's going to give you a really nice smooth finish. These edges, I am also using the 220 grit. You want to be really careful not to ruin the edges on those. And after taking the top off, there was a little bit of wood and stuff left behind and some glue, so I decided to just take that down and get it nice and smooth. So one of the things about mid-century stuff is that usually the legs and handles and stuff like that, trim pieces, are going to be a lot different color from the veneer that they actually use, and you can tell after sanding that stuff down, it was pretty light, and I'm not sure if it was poplar or pine. I'm pretty sure it was poplar. It was a little more sturdy than pine would be, but you can tell here the veneer is obviously a lot darker, so I'm going to address that later on in the video. After using the electric sander on all of the legs, it does tend to leave some really hard lines on the rounded edges, so I go over with a 220 grit piece of sandpaper by hand, and I really fine finish and sand all of those dip back down so that they're nice and round. I then take some mineral spirits just because I want to get an idea of what color this wood is going to look like, and as you can tell, it is super light, and I want it to match as closely as possible. As you can see here, it's more of a reddish brown. I'm pretty sure it's like a walnut, so I'm using red oak stain to try to see if it's gonna match, and so far it looks pretty decent. I tried some red mahogany, and on that wood it almost looked the same. In person it did look a little bit more red, so I decided to go with that. I'm gonna stain all the bases down with some red mahogany, and we're gonna see how that looks later on. So this is another thing that I like about Lane and mid-century pieces in general, that they can come apart like they do. I'm able to get stain on all of the parts where if I put the top back on, it would be a little more difficult to sand those areas and stain them, and it just makes my job a lot easier. So after staining the base, I noticed that it really soaked in that stain really dark. So I tried to use just a natural finish on the top just to see what it would come out like, and it was lighter than the base, surprisingly. So I decided to just use the same stain on the top, and what I did to kind of get the base to match a little bit better is that I did go over it a second time with a dark walnut stain over top of the red, and it worked out. I mean, it worked out pretty perfect to me. These two pieces you see here are the bottom shelves, and I'm getting them ready for a top coat. And for the top, I'm going to be reattaching that to the base just to make it a lot easier for me to move it around and finish it as it's going to stay. So most of these screws go back in without a problem, but some of them, because the bit on my drill is just a little too short, I go in with a hand screwdriver and I tighten those up, and that's pretty much all there is to that. So for these pieces, I was trying to determine what top coat I wanted to use for it. I started to contemplate using like a natural oil, like either Danish oil or some kind of hard wax. But because they're such a high traffic area and they're going to be used to place a lot of items on all the time, I decided to go with a water-based polyurethane. I'm going to do 3 coats of that on everything, with sanding in between each coat of 400. And I think it's just going to give the best protection that it can possibly get. Just a little side note as well, oil-based finishes take a lot longer to dry. They can take up to a day just to recoat and take 2 to 3 days to cure. Polyurethane, I did all 3 of these coats in the same day, and they were finished fairly fast and easy. So here's a little trick that I discovered. I took the rag that I would wipe all the excess stain off with, and I actually went over the polyurethane just to richen the color up a bit. And it's not really gonna stay on the surface, it's just kind of to fill the deeper spots like the grain. And it actually works out really perfect. You just want to wipe it on really lightly and then go back and just go in the same direction as the grain to wipe it off, and then give it about 24 hours to dry, and it looks really good. And I'm just reassembling the lower shelf back onto these pieces so that way I can turn them around, and I'm going to be waxing these. I'm using Big Mama's Butter by Dixie Belle. They did actually send me this product to try out, and it is amazing. It smells super good, and it really enhances your piece and really adds some luster to your color. And as you can tell, even though polyurethane is pretty, depending on the finish you choose, is nice, but this stuff really brings out a shine in this piece, and you can just apply it whenever you need it. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this piece used to look before. I have to say, I really do enjoy these smaller pieces and doing full restorations. It gives me a chance to focus on something that is a lot smaller compared to a lot of the massive projects that I do, and I hope to do a lot more of these in the future. And with that said, let's go over the numbers really quickly on this one. I did spend $25 each on these with a grand total of $50. I pretty much had no material costs into this because I only used maybe a couple of pieces of sandpaper, and all the stain and everything I already had. So I did sell these for $450, bringing me $400 in profit, and it probably only took me about 4 to 5 hours to do these. It was just a lot of sanding, and that's like $400 an hour. So I think it was really worth it to do some of these smaller pieces every once in a while. Thank you guys for reaching the end of the video with me, and I can't wait to see you guys on the next one.